Thank you for joining this webinar. This is quite a lot of people that registered for the English version, so we're glad to have you with us. Alix Renaud, that will be the presenter, is past a national team member for numerous years, and now one of the strength training coach at the INSQ, working with the numerous national teams. So without any delay, because there's a lot of information to share, I will pass the control to Alix.
Hi, everyone. So for today, what we will be actually seeing is the physical training in Judo, just at large. So we're going to have some recall on some fundamental subjects, so like strength and energetic system. But after, a main part of the presentation will be about the training for kids and teenager, and some principles, some really important exercise and some cue that I am using currently with the athletes that I am working with. So we will start. First of all, with the physical training in Judo, where to start? The idea is to be able to do a good sport analysis. So what are the needs for the athletes, and like what are everything like on the physical prep, so strength, speed, whatever. And also the other part that's really important, it's like what are the need of your athlete or the group that you are working with, if there is anything about like injury in the past or some stuff that the athlete or the group need to work on. That's also something that you need to look at. So to be sure to do a good physical training for Judo and to work on the optimization of the sports performance, we will be looking at what we can do as a strength and conditioning coach to help for the performance, but also on the injury prevention and on the weight management. So if we look at the performance, we're gonna have the muscle qualities like max strength, max power, speed, power, strength, power, and muscle mass. There is also the VO2 max that we will be looking at, and after that, the muscle endurance. Since we know that the athlete have to do some intense movement, like and demand for like 4 minutes nonstop. On the physical demands, what we can find right now in the studies for the men, when we look at the maximum strength for the 1RM between 132 and 1.5 times their body weight, that's what we are looking for, a maximum strength. For the woman, there is no data right now. So just to be clear, the info that I'm like showing right now, it's the physical demand for Judo athletes, but like for Judo athlete of high level. On the aerobic power side, for men, we're looking to have a VO2 around aiming for 60 milliliter by kilo by minute. But what we have right now, often the average will be between 47.3 and 59.3. For the woman, we are aiming for 55 milliliter by kilo by minute. But what we can see right now, it's often around 43.7 and 52.9. On the anaerobic endurance side, there is no data that we can find on the lactate in competition, but there are some studies that did simulation of combat, and they saw that the peak of the lactatemia will be around 18 millimole by liter. And on the maximum power, from a study that they did on judokas in France, they said that they had like a correlation between the level of the maximum power and the level of competition of the judokas. So if you look at the regional compared to the national team, people on the athlete on the national team had like way higher maximum power output than the one from like the regional level. So just a quick reminder on the energy system, since I spoke about the anaerobic system and the aerobic system, so the VO2. We see that there is 3 different energy systems that work kind of like at certain degree in same time. But what we want to look at, it's the VO2 max, just because the regeneration of the reserve of the ATP and PCR is dependent on the aerobic power. So of course, our athletes are not going to go outside and run a marathon. That's not the goal. But the fact that they have a VO2 max is going to help them recover between each fight that they will be doing. So that's why that when we look at the energy system that we are using with Judo, it will be more about the anaerobic system because of the time that a fight will be on. But for all the small, we'll say explosive movements, so for every technique, we will be more into the anaerobic lactic system. And like I said, if you're comparing to an athlete that will run a marathon, that will be more the aerobic system that will be the main energy system for that athlete that is important. So we will now jump into the key factor for neuromuscular development. So on that part, there is different point that we need to look at, and that's going to also affect what I'm going to tell you later for the strength development for the kids. So first of all, you have the muscle size, so the hypertrophy level. If you look at the picture, you have like the men on the left, they are like smaller, so not really muscular. On the right, you have like bigger muscle. And on the second line, you have like that nervous system, so inter and intramuscular coordination. So same thing, the size of the picture represent how much that part will be having an effect on the muscular force level. So if you look at the bottom, like where there is a dumbbell, you're gonna know how much those two are working together to be to have an effect on the maximum force level. So if we look at the far left, as you can tell, the character is small, not a lot of like nervous system, so the load that he's able to move, it's quite small. If you look at the second one in the green square, he's still lean, but he have like more nervous system that will be working him to be able to move a higher load. And if you look on the far right, like that's where the guy with a lot of muscle and a good nervous system will be able to really produce the maximal force level. So the idea here is to understand that strength gain does not necessarily mean mass muscle gain. So because the neural factor have a big role to play for the strength, to increase strength, the central nervous system has 3 different mechanisms. First, the recruitment increasingly important motor units in the same muscle. So spatial summation mean going to be important for 80% of the maximum possibilities. By that, we mean that if we look in the bicep, if there is more and more muscle fiber that they will be firing up because of the motor unit, more fiber units would be able to actually participate to the movement. If you look after that into the temporal summation, so an increase of the discharge frequency of already activated unit. So they are working more like together now, not like one once again and the other one is going to fire up. So really like more in the same time, you're going to still be able to go fire up more muscle units, sorry. So that's going to be for 20% of the maximum possibilities of our strength. And finally, the number 3, the better relaxation, contraction, synchronization between the agonist and antagonist muscle help for a better efficiency of the movement. So if you look, by example, to the bicep curl, my bicep will be doing the movement, but my tricep will be there also to give some stability in the movement. So it will be working. But if there is like a good contraction, relaxation, synchronization, my tricep will be able to actually just let go enough so it's still like helping on the movement, but without giving any resistance to my bicep. So the idea here is like the quality of the nerve command will help for the number of the recruitment of the motor unit in the same muscle. So more motor units firing up in same time, gonna help you be stronger. After that, you have the structural factor. So we're really talking more about like the nature of the muscle fiber that the motor unit will be connected to. So we have 3 types, the fiber type 1, 2A, and 2B. If you look more into the fiber 1, those ones are really like smaller. They are more like an endurance type of fiber compared to the 2B that they are bigger and they are like more used for the power movement, but they are not as much endurance. So for number 2, for the structural factor, the cross-sectional area of the fiber and all the muscle required. So if you take my bicep, you cut it in the middle, there is some number of myofibril that will be actually used to do the movement. And if you take someone else who's bigger, so like plus 100, and same thing, you cut the bicep, you're gonna have like more fiber than I, so he will be able to produce more strength than I, just because of that number. And finally, the state of shortening or stretching of the muscle. There is a one sweet spot, actually, if you look at the graph in the middle, that if you get the muscle all stretched, so at the end, you can tell that there is like no strength that that muscle will be able to produce. Same thing goes if it's like all shorter, because you're not gonna have any space to produce strength with the unit, the fiber, sorry. So that's why like in the middle of my movement, there is that sweet spot that I'm able to produce the max strength in my muscle. So that's just like some info about the fiber that I was talking before. I'm just gonna jump to that one about the chronology of nerve and muscle adaptation in the development of strength. So if we look at a beginner, so a beginner that will be still starting to work maybe 2 or 3 times per week, we will see an increasing in strength, but it will be primarily due to the development of the neural factor. So what I was saying before, better relaxation, contraction, synchronization between muscle and being able to actually recruit more fiber in his muscle. So after that, it does change, but the beginning, it's really like just about those neural factor. I'm gonna look at the work zone for maximum strength and hypertrophy. So if we look at our graph, at the bottom, you have the number of repetitions that you can do. And on the left, you have the percentage of the 1 RM. So that means the load that you will be able to move. So if we go on the top left, we will be more into a maximum strength window of work. So low repetition, but high load, to give you an idea. So if we go in the middle, in between those 5 and 8, that's kind of like a mixed window, I will say, because you're gonna have like some gain in strength by the volume, but also some neural factor that will contribute there. After that, if you go more on the right, so more about the muscle volume, still hypertrophy. So there is like more reps, but that also means that you're gonna be moving less weight. The weight that you are going to be using gonna be like lighter. Finally, if you go below 55% of 1 RM, the charge, like the weight that you will be moving will be too low actually to be able to cause significant hypertrophy to the muscle. Just a quick reminder about the different type of contraction in the muscle. So we have like isometric, concentric, and eccentric, and you can tell that the strength will, it's easier, by example, to move slowly in the eccentric phase because you're going to be able to have higher weight when you move like that compared to the concentric. It's going to be harder to move the same weight slower. So strength are power qualities to develop it in athlete. Also, just so you know, after that presentation, you will have access to the PowerPoint. So I know I'm going quite quick over some of those slides, but I'm going to be able to look at those after too. So strength are power qualities to develop in the athletes. For the judo, we are really looking at the maximum strength, strength power, and maximum power. Those are the most important for judo compared to speed power or explosiveness. Why? It's because we are actually going against an opponent that weighs the same than we do. So the idea, it's like we don't need that much speed power because our goal is not to kick a ball as far as possible. Our goal is actually to throw someone. So two athletes that have the same weight, but there is one that will be like actually stronger and will be able to move a higher load, have better chance to, it's gonna give him like an edge on his opponent. Quickly, I will be talking about the strength speed profile. Those are like some example of load that you can use for a different work zone. So kind of what I just showed you before. So you have your strength max that will be like between 85% of the 1RM to 120% of the same 1RM. After that, you have like strength power that will be more in the middle of that curve, because you still want to be able to move the load fast. But if you move something really, really heavy, it's going to be really hard to achieve that. After that, you have speed power and speed strength. So by speed strength, we're really talking about like something, a really, really like a short movement of some seconds with like some good weight. So we can think about like weightlifting, by example. So that curve can be obtained with like a gym aware encoder that measures speed with different weights. So it's really hard that if you don't have those tools to be able to do that kind of like strength speed profile. But the idea, I just want you to be able to identify which weight you will be using for which qualities you want to develop. After that, we're going to be talking about that training specificity. So in that study, we had like two groups. The first group was working more into the plyo kind of exercise movement, and the second group was working more onto in the weightlifting, so hang, clean, or those kind of movement. So when they did that study, they compared the effect of explosive training and heavy weight training on the strength, time, and strength relationship. And what they found out is like the muscle adapts to the load at which it's trained and also adapts to the speed at which it is trained. So there is that specificity that you need to think about. If I will be working only on the speed, my muscle, like I will be actually getting faster, but that doesn't mean that I will be getting stronger because I'm not working on my strength, right? So it's really thinking about that kind of specificity that you have to look at when you're choosing the exercise or the qualities you want to work on. So the next slides actually are about that strength speed profile, and there are some, we'll say, example of which type of training will have with impact it will have on that profile. You know, and like the goal is, if you look at the graph, the blue line is like my baseline. So my goal as a strength and conditioning coach will be to move that baseline higher, you know, just do a translation up. But the reality is you can't do that. So you have to work at different speed, at different weight to be able to have an impact on that strength and speed profile. So the first example is on the endurance strength and hypertrophy. You can tell that, yes, I will have some gain on the strength side, but also I will be slower. So I still need to work on my speed at some point. Same thing for the maximum strength. And after that, maximum power. Since the power, when you're working power, the load that you will be working with is more like in the middle of that strength and speed profile. Well, it's still that specificity idea that if you're working with those load, that's where you're gonna get better. After that, same thing with weightlifting. And just a summary about strength or power quality to develop in athletes. So some idea of like, if you want to work on the maximum strength, what percent of the load you will need to be working at, number of repetition per series, and the number of series on the same muscle group, etc. So that's just a good guideline for you to use when you're thinking about that strength and conditioning training for your athletes. Also, something that we also need to think about is the training frequency, overcompensation, and rest. The rest is really important because if you're working and there is no rest, you will never be able to have that overcompensation effect. So that effect will be the idea that my athletes is actually getting better and getting over that baseline. So if you look at the average time for overcompensation on the same muscle group, for the muscular endurance and hypertrophy, we look at 2 to 3 days in between training. For max strength, 2 days. For power and max speed, half a day to 1 day. And if we look at our graph, I will be working, by example, that you can see that it's in red. Right after, there is some fatigue that my athlete's gonna have to deal with, and some recovery time. What you can tell, it's like after my body will have worked with the type of training that I did, I'm gonna have an overcompensation effect. So on that overcompensation effect, I'm gonna train again. And there's so to really think about getting that baseline up. So that's why the rest is still important when we're looking, by example, on the week of like when I'm gonna be doing my strength and conditioning training. You need to think about that. After that, so quickly, is weight training dangerous? So sometimes people think that weight training is dangerous, especially for kids. There is like, you shouldn't start working out with kids because it will be dangerous for their back, or you're gonna get injured, or those kind of idea. So the answer of that's obviously like, no, it's not dangerous if you do it well. So if you don't neglect the warm-ups, if you use a proper technique for each exercise that you're doing, if you think about following a progressive loading and following like a proper way to monitor the fatigue. So be sure that the athlete is well rested, or he's not over like fatigue to be working out, right? So if you're following those steps and like always keep those in mind, there is like no chance that you're gonna get injured doing like those strength and conditioning session. Now I'm gonna talk about the strength training for children and teenager. We wait often to say that strength training limit growth, that strength training hurts your back, especially for kids. That's all those like sentences are wrong, because only if the training movement technique is not well done and if the loads, the movement, and the objective are not adapted, that's where you have chance of hurting yourself or like kids or teenager. So also we sometimes hear that weight training affect growth, that it delays growth. The reality, it's like it doesn't have an impact on the maturation, because it's the only reason why we'll have like a delayed about like the growth will be because of an insufficient energy intake, not because they are lifting weight. Instead, we have to look at the kids and like the teenage age as a window of opportunity. That means that's the right time to start weight training. And you have to think about weight training not as just like doing back squat with 100 kilo on your back. You can think about just learning how to move well, learning how to do a deep squat with a good posture, knowing how to do a good push-up all those steps will help them to arrive later when they are like older and ready to lift weights, to be actually ready and be sure that they are not gonna get injured. So if we look at that graph, the idea it's like we have two times. We have the pre-puberty and the puberty. So if we look at the different strength development factor possible to apply based on the biological age, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. So if you look at the size of the letter in the graph, it's related to the importance of the factor described. So when you are in pre-puberty, the neurofactor will have an effect, but it will be a small one on the strength. When you move into puberty, you can tell that at the beginning, it's still the neurofactor that have a big impact, but when you're moving to the middle and the end, you can tell that it's more the structural factor that will help increase strength at their age. So that's what you need to keep thinking, those windows of opportunity. So about the chronological age versus biological, the idea it's like we all know some teenage boy that are like 12. There is one that's still small, doesn't have a lot of like muscle mass, and he's not really strong compared to the one of his friend who's also 12 but look like he's already almost 6 feet tall and like super strong. So the idea it's like the chronological age will be like 12 since both of them are 12, right? But the biological age would be way different between them because they're not at the same moment. Like the maturation, motor skills are not the same, and the physical and mental abilities are not the same. So therefore, the biological age of the child, that will determine the objective of the physical preparation work. So if he's young and if he's in like that pre-puberty phase, you're not going to be able to load. It's more about the goal of moving and body weight exercise compared to the one that's a little bit like more mature, that was still gonna need to work on that technique, but look like you're gonna maybe be able to get start to work with some weight a little bit sooner. So always think about the difference between those two. So keeping that in mind, when we look at the graph on the right, we see that before pre-puberty, boys and girls, we have the same strength gains. After the puberty, it's really different between those two. So when the girls are younger, they're gonna have the increase of the max strength will be between 11.5 and 12.5 years compared to the boys that's going to be a little bit later at 14.5 to 15.5 years old. If you look at the stabilization of the max strength, the girl would be around 18 years and the boy between 20 and 13 years. That doesn't mean that past 18 years you can't work on max strength development with a girl. Doesn't mean that. It just means that in those age, that's really where you have the more like gains that you can go get for the strength development. So what type of training should we offer based on the age? So before puberty, the development of strength will be done through the solicitation of the nervous factor, like we saw on the graph. It is, if it is possible to develop strength using conventional weight training program made from guided device like pole, it's still more appropriate to use circuit, so motor circuit, during which it will be you could be able to work on the speed, motor coordination, and balance. Since they are still young, the idea is to keep it playful and just for them to have fun while moving into the training. At the level of the energy sector, so more the energy system, the anaerobic lactic work, so like short power movements, so like sprint, jump, and aerobic are not problematic. So you can still be working on that. But all the lactic type is not you can work a little bit on that, but for those ages, you are not able to deal that well with that kind of exercise. So, and the last thing that you still need to think about, since they are like still young, it's during childhood and adolescence, the bone system is fragile. During puberty, at the beginning of it, so before the peak, emphasizes the development of nerve factors, but start learning the basic movement of strength training. No load or very light load. So you can talk about like working with a broomstick for working on your back squat, thinking about push-up. It's still like it's body weight. It's a good way to work on how to push the load. And after that, during puberty, you can start using weight of the body, elastic and light loads in the movement. It's also a good time for the development of a speed, so speed of reaction, acceleration capacity, speed of coordination, and speed endurance. The peak of growth is a phase where we often see a deterioration of the flexibility. So that's why it's important to still work on that quality without overloading the passive musculoskeletal system. So the idea there, it's like often at the peak, you can see that the young boy gain a lot of muscle, and because of that, they lose a little bit of flexibility. So we still want you to work on that qualities without doing like 10 hours per week, because that's not going to help actually to keep that flexibility. So just a little bit of work during the week gonna help them to keep that. After the growth peak to the end of the puberty is the ideal period for the development of strength in both structural and nervous factor. So you need to, it's a good window. Like I said, if you did all the work before and they have like a good technique, that's where you can start putting some load in the movement. And also, even if it's like that, it is a good phase to work on all that muscle qualities, just be careful, because the muscular system, it's still not ready to go into like a maximum strength, like big loaded squat. They are not ready for that. They are not strong enough. And like I said, the bones are still like the bones, yeah, the skeleton is still fragile. So you have to think about that. What are the precautions to take? First, be sure that the strength training program and those for the development of energy must be offered by qualities professional who have a teaching experience with children. So be sure that before starting something like a program with some kids, you can reach out to a professional, talk with them about like what you're thinking about doing, and exchange about that to be sure that you have the help that you need. After that, always think about having a good warm-up that include aerobic and stretching exercise before any strength workout. There, we're talking about dynamic stretching, so something that that you will hold for 5 seconds, but not more than that. So we're not talking about like the passive one that you will maybe hold for 30 seconds. We don't want that kind of stretching before like a strength workout. And also, you can do some exercise without load and just work at that range of motion. So by example, body weight squat will be a good exercise. After the first strength training session must be always directed toward technical work, and also about all the posture, to be sure that for those first session, the athlete will know how to move and will be ready after to put some weight in the movement. Never increase the load until the technique is perfectly mastered. Adapt the program to the child's biological age, like I said earlier, and always work agonist-antagonist muscle to not create any muscle imbalance. What progression should we follow at what dose? So first, because it's for a beginner kids. And by the way, it's also true for any adults. You want to work first with body weight, and after that you can add elastic, medicine ball, Swiss ball, and lightweight. So really think about having a progression of intensity in those movements, and always think about keeping that quality of movement for all the exercise. After that, the program must consist of basic exercise, multi-articular, so bench press, deadlift, or squat, or multi-articular exercise. After that, basic exercise to to help strengthening the shoulder and the pelvic belts, and finally the core strength. So everything around like the abs and the lower back. So also when you're doing a progression, should think about working all the major muscle groups and to be working in the entire range of motion. That's where you're going to be able to have good gains, and that's where you actually should work on that. When they are younger, you just want to be sure that you're not stopping the movement when the athlete is actually good enough to go all the way down, by example, in a squat. You want to use that as an opportunity to be sure that his technique is really good before thinking about, oh, well, I want something really specific. In a way, you're not doing like drop senagi or other things. So maybe we're just going to stop doing their squat and a quarter squat. No, when they're young, you want to work on that full range of motion. After that, use loads allowing 10 to 12 repetition. So if my athlete is getting better, well, if he's able to do 14 repetition with the weight that we were using, I will be like, hey, yes, you're getting good at that. Well, we still want to challenge you a little bit. So I'm gonna add some weight and gonna try to stay into those windows of repetition. After each exercise, max 8 exercise, has a maximum of 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetition. Since they are beginner, if you put more than that, you're just gonna see like fatigue getting there, and like the technique is not going to be there. So that's why we think it's better to have less exercise and be sure that you still keep a good quality. After that, the training load must be gradually increased through the program by intensity. So by adding mass, so increasing the load that they are moving, or you can also increase the challenge by the number of repetition of the number of series. The frequency of the training on the week should be 2 to 3 non-consecutive workouts, especially if you want to develop strength in those athletes. And for the recovery time between exercise, for the kids, they actually have a lower muscular fatigability, so they don't need a long recovery between exercise compared to like teenager that will be following the same kind of recovery time than adult. Finally, think about combining the muscular reinforcement exercise with specific sport work. It's going to actually end up into a better transfer of strength in the sport gesture. So quickly, some exercise classification. Training for beginners should consist of basic exercise, core, and educational basic exercise. So by those basic exercise, what we mean some multi-pluriarticular exercise movement. So squat, leg press, bench press, by example. After that, those the one with like the abs, sorry, for the core would be also really important because that's the middle of the body, right? So you want a strong core to be able to deal with all the strength that will have to deal with like the fight. So if someone is pushing them, are they going to be able to keep a good back and core engaged so they're not losing their position? Same thing for a squat. If their core it's not strong, they will be falling forward and having a poor technique. That's why it's important. So actually talking about that. If you want a good transfer of the strength, so a good transfer of the power in the movement, you need a proper coordination of the muscle composing the different muscular chain. So then being at the back or the front chain. So because of that, the physical preparation should begin with strengthening the trunk, the core, strengthening the scapular belt. So everything around the shoulder, and finally strengthening the pelvic belt. So it's more hip area that we'll be looking at. Different methods to do the exercise. You can use the circuit training, or there is different type. There is the alternating series program by workstation, so vertical. It's really like an interesting way to present the exercise. So for young athletes that don't have a lot of experience, help them to actually discover every different exercise and still be training on the technical aspect of it without any fatigue. It's also easier to set it up for a training group. So if you have 15 kids that you're working with, that type of circuit, it's easier to put in place. After that, you have this circuit training, or more like series program, group by workstation. So that means that it's only one exercise that you will be doing, and you're going to do, by example, 3 sets. So one exercise, you do your 3 sets, and after that, you go to the second exercise. If you look more to the mixed circuit training series, it's those one are like more super series or 3 series. You can use them by actually having upper body and lower body exercise. So that helps the athlete to not be tired between those exercises. So it's going to also help them on the technical aspect of the movement. Example of the exercise for children. We're looking at something more body weight. We're looking about how the knees is aligned, is it going inside, is the kid able to like keep his torso up or no. So those are some exercises that you can use that are mainly body weight, and you can add after some like free weight. Some other exercise that are more like on one leg. So that's a good way to actually increase the challenge of the movement and the difficulty, because it will only be on one leg, and it's just a good way to challenge any kids without having to use really like heavier loads. You can add some band work too. It's a good way to increase load for them. Some exercise, so some example. If you look at the first line, it's more like lower body type. It's a different way to start from like really body weight to be sure that the back is straight, the leg is up, and after that, if they are good with that, we can add the band to put like to get it the movement a bit harder. And when they are still good at that, that's where we can think about, okay, we can start using a bit of load. At the bottom, it's more like from, so for some back exercise, the first one is more about like proprioception. So really feeling how your shoulder is moving in the different range of motion. Also, that can help them realize that they have some asymmetry between their left or the right, and some pulling exercise, body weight. So some idea on that part. After that, some core exercise. So at the beginning, we will be more aiming to work directly on the floor. If they are getting good, well, you're gonna start using maybe Swiss ball and starting to move in different range band plan. So like I'm gonna start having like more rotation movement instead of just up and down movement, to just get challenge them a little bit. On the right, you have some exercise with some pulley. So by example, part of press. That's also challenge on the, so it's a good challenge for the core. The idea, it's like you're gonna be working against the weight that want to break your posture. So if we think about like judokas, it's really a good thing. Those kind of exercise, it's we'll say it's the transfer to the sport, it's like more there, we'll see. A proprioception exercise, you can do it on one leg, eyes open, eyes closed. After that, you can, if they're good with that, you can start to add some unstable platform. Could be a pillow, bossu, Swiss ball, or balance board. It's an example of circuit training with alternating series for young and recreational judoka. So some bodyweight exercise, after that some band exercise, some abs and power movement with some balls. So it's something it's really easy to do in a dojo, by example, if you don't have access to a lot of weight, and it's easier to do with like a group compared to some like one exercise at a time, I mean. On the right, you can see that there is like that danger picture. It just means that when you're doing a full setup, you're also using a lot of your psoas. So you're not fully working on your abs when you're doing that movement, compared to a crunch that really gonna be like specific for the abs work, since the range of motion is a little bit less. So it's less about like that hip flexion when you're going up, and more about having your abs helping you just moving up. Finally, for those kind of circuit, you can use a number of repetition per exercise, or you can also use a time of work. The idea is to always keep a rest time between the exercise and always respect the right technique. When we were talking about the specific exercise, you can have some movement with some bend that are specific to judo into those circuit. So it's more playful, I will say, and it's also just easier to do after, by example, a training at the dojo. If you choose to do one of those circuits after a judo training, actually think about putting it at the end, because the athletes are going to be tired if you do that at the beginning. And if you want to show technique during the class, they might be not as good to listen, since they're going to be already tired from the work that they did prior. In the gym, if you do a circuit, that's where you can start adding some weight. For sure, those kind of circuits are more for advanced athletes. So back squat with weight, abs work, bench, back extension, some work with the pulley. Same idea, you can choose to do a number of reps per exercise, or you can choose to do a certain time of work. So like 30 seconds work, 10 seconds off for one exercise, and after that you go to the next one. Really important to keep after the first set of all those exercises some rest, because you still want some qualities in the movement. So you don't want your athlete to be just already tired after the first set. You want them to be able to reproduce that kind of work, and it's, when you think about it, it's kind of what we want when they are doing fights, right? So good point is to work with the kinesiologist or strength and conditioning coach to develop program if you are not trained yourself in physical preparation. After that, we're going to look at some strength and training fundamental. So the Yvan Proto and Sylvain Pelou-Prayer did a book that all the pictures are from, and it's a good reference if you need some help to look at, to know how to do the proper technique for the movement. So first of all, with kids, what I really like to do, it's some proprioception exercise, so without weight, just to learn how to have a good placement with their back and shoulder. So some of the exercise that you can do is just have them go against the wall with their leg a little bit forward, so they are able to keep a neutral spine. A neutral spine is simply the neutral placement of your lumbar spine. So you can ask them to breathe in and just arch their back as far as possible while keeping their shoulder and their sacrum against the wall. And after that, try to put their vertebrae against the wall. So they are really like moving into the range of motion on the lumbar spine and the thoracic spine. And after that, you ask them to come back in the middle, like the beginning. And for them, that's going to help them to actually have cues of what is a neutral spine. Same thing for the shoulder. There is a lot of range of motion that we have at our shoulder. So make them just experiment going up as close to their ear as possible and down. And after that, come back to that middle where they feel it's the neutral position. And just to realize, okay, that's where my shoulder should be when I'm moving. So we will look at some exercise that you will be able to do with your athlete. So first of all, some exercise for shoulders posture correction. We know that athletes have the tendency to have a sphatic posture, so their shoulder is like kind of rolling forward, and they are not. They have a hard time actually standing straight with their chest out. So you can do some external shoulder rotator at the beginning of a training. That's going to help them get those small muscle in the shoulder ready to work, ready to fire up. When they are doing that, you want to look at their posture. Are they like standing tall? Are the shoulders going closer ear or they're not? And you want to look at the elbow. The elbow should like stay close to the body. Also, if you have some athletes that they have a hard time doing that, you can help them with starting by kind of massage the pec. So release the tension into the pec. After that, some stretching. Since at the beginning of the workout, you will be looking more into a dynamic kind of stretching. So hold for 5 seconds, relax 5 seconds, do that again 3 to 4 times. And finally, that rotator cuff exercise to get everything ready to go for to work. After that, some fundamental core exercise. So the plank, it's really a good place to start since it's you are not moving and it's really easy to do. By that, I mean that you still need to give cues to your athletes because you want them to have a good proprioception, but it's the easy one to start with. So when they are doing that, you want to look at their head. Are they looking forward? Are they looking on the ground? After that, the shoulder position. Is the shoulder already closed from the ear or they're still able to keep them active, so down? What is the position of the lumbar spine? When we're talking about that neutral spine position, that's what we want to look there. You can give cues about the belly button that you want them to kind of breathe in or get them as close as possible as the lumbar spine. Something that I really like to do to do that is to put a broomstick on their back. So it's give them a feedback of what the position of their head, the position of their lower back. So you have a broomstick, put them on them. The broomstick will be touching to the head between the scapula and at the top of their sacrum. Yeah. And after that, on the same thing, you have some example of the position of the body that you want to avoid. About the setup, some progression for the setup. So the same idea that what I spoke before, you want to be sure that you're working the abs and not the psoas when you're doing the movement. Bench press, so a really important movement for the judoka. When they are doing it, you want to look at the shoulder. Is the shoulder away from the ear? if the chest out, what is the position about the wrist? Are they active or are they actually inactive? And the bar just resting in their hand. You want to have like that active position. After that, for the position of the spine, you want to have the shoulder, the lower back, and both of your feet on the ground flat. If you can tell that they're arching the back to be able to touch the ground with their feet, I will propose to add like a step under their feet so they are able to maintain that neutral spine. It's better to have like a hip flexion on that position that have like a big lumbar spine curve because it increased chance of injuries. After that, just be aware that athletes that have longer arm will be maybe people with a narrow rib cage and long forearms are more likely to get injured when working at a maximum strength because their muscles are all stretched, and like I was talking earlier, if they are all stretched and not able to produce a lot of strength into that position, though, so they might have better chance to get injured. Low pulley pulling, so any like pulling movement that we want to work with them, same idea. We want to look at that lumbar spine position. The chest is out, the shoulder are back. That's something that you can be really more aware of, is the shoulder position. Are they rolling forward? Because if they are rolling forward, they will be like pitching the front of it, so that might lead to injuries. That's something that we don't want. So really think about keeping that good posture and looking if they are actually using their back muscle. If you look at the picture on the right, the man is actually placing his finger between the scapula. So that give a good feedback to the athlete to like, okay, is my muscle firing up, or actually I'm not using them at all. So it's a good cue. High pulley pulling. So those are like some common mistake. Usually what I would prefer is to bring the bar in front of you. If you're really under it, or if the kid is actually really, really short, we'll say, you can just move a little bit back your torso to bring the bar. Same thing when they are starting with the movement, they have to start the movement with their shoulder and think about bringing their scapula down to their back pocket. So that's going to help them having that good momentum with the shoulder instead of just pulling and keeping their shoulder high. Exercise for the position of the back. It's mainly what I explained earlier, but you can do it into that position. So it's more a deadlift position. That's going to help them also understand what they are supposed to achieve in that position. So like that neutral spine that we spoke earlier. So you can work with the broomstick just to give them like the feedback about if they had bar, how the arm would be placed. And finally, that's bring us to our squat now. What we are looking at when someone is doing a squat is the knees alignment. Are they going in? Are they going out? We want them over the second toes. Also, same thing on the side. Are they looking forward? Are they looking on the floor? How is their back? And are they still like keeping that core engaged? Okay. So the idea is if they are looking on the floor, they will be following where they are looking at. So they might be actually heading all the way down instead of like keeping that chest up. And we want to keep that chest up, right? So same idea with the squat about if you have long bones, you will have more stress in your lumbar level, because you're gonna have to lean forward. So it's just something to think about with some of your athletes, especially when they are getting bigger. Also maintain the natural curve of the back by adjusting the placement of the pelvis. So the same movement that I was telling you before. You can also do them into the squat position. That will help the athletes to understand what is the placement that they need to have. And just quickly, what range of motion for the squat we are looking at? Complete, half, quarter. Since we're working with child or a teenager, we really want to be working on that full range of motion. Okay. The idea is like sometimes you will say, oh, well, it's not that specific. My athlete is not doing any drop. He's just doing Uchimata. When they are young, you just really want to develop their capacity to move well. You want to be sure that they have the tools when they get older to move into those movement without any like pain, and you want to be able to have them you just want to be sure that they have all the tools when they are younger. So that's why you want to always work on that full range of motion. Some information about the deadlift. I think I'm gonna have to skip for the rest, and I'm gonna just go quickly into training and assessment for the aerobic power test. So aerobic power test, VO2 max. There is some tests that you can do with the big group. It's not really expensive. You just need to buy the video record to have like the, I would say like the beep, the timing of the different level of those tests. So those are like 3 tests that you can do with a group easily. And like I said, you can find like those recording on internet. So that information is with the shuttle tests, aerobic power training. So from the testing that you have done before with your athlete, you can use their result to be like to a starting point to work on the aerobic power training. So quickly, what we know, it's the short interval of work, could be running, could be biking, whatever, will help to increase the VO2 max faster than just going outside for a run of 5K in low intensity. So short interval are better for that. After that, the lactic anaerobic capacity increase for a higher effort above 100% of the PME or the mass, so the aerobic power. And finally, the short interval are more effective for weight management because it causes a greater energy exertion. On that part, just quickly, for the anaerobic lactic endurance tests, the thing that I want you to remember, it's all the tests that we can find in the literature, so on the internet. It's mainly about lower limb, and the reality of the judo, it's the upper limb that are doing that kind of work. So it could be interesting to do that with your athletes, but I want you just to know what are the limits of those kind of tests that are not perfectly representing of the sport that they are doing. So in conclusion, if you're working with young kids and recreational judo level, just think that the goal of the physical work is more about injury prevention. So dojo circuit may be sufficient, and you can use like those alternating circuit training with them. For competitive judo, we want to increase the muscle quality, so that maximal strength, maximal power, and strength power, that muscle mass. We also want to do some injury prevention, do some development of the VO2 max and the muscular endurance, and finally help them with the weight management. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Alix. That was very interesting. For the next 10 minutes, if anybody has question, please unmute yourself and go ahead. So floor is yours.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Beaton.
Is there any way that on the website or a way that the provincial coaches or club coaches could sign in and just get some sort of like sample training plans, different ages, kind of just something that again it can go from the very basic, here's a body weight training plan that we recommend for judo. Here's this, and then it goes to obviously the more advanced to again under 21. Something that gives us a little bit of hands-on paper, and then the ability to have the coaches ask questions, if they're in a problem area.
Yes, well noted. I think the issue to create sample is that it kind of move away from personalizing a program. I think that's always been one of the main concern, but it's something we can look to and see if we can create some simple template programs.
Correct.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Palmer.
But you've mentioned ensuring that you have proper rest inside of training program, which I agree with. Something that I've always struggled with is more than one workout session per day. So you have a weight training session in the day plus a judo session. How can you balance the rest that you need for those?
Usually, if you have the chance to have some rest in between your session, I will say like have one of the session in the morning and one in the afternoon, right? After that, there is like some recovery strategy that you can have. So it could be like on the nutrition side or more about like power naps are a good strategy to recover. But those are something that you need to think about with your free time in between. If you don't have free time, for sure, I will say that your goal would be to still have quality training in the weight room and quality training on the mat, right? So you might not do the same amount of work if you are doing the 2 sessions back to back compared to if you're doing the 2 sessions spread on the day.
Okay, merci.
I can add to that explanation later on to you, Kelly, if you want to, but I have actually a question or suggestion perhaps. For the professional as you are, Alix, and for many younger generation of coaches who are going through kinesiology studies, etc., it's very easy to detect what is the proper and what is not a proper way of doing certain exercises. Mm-hmm. But for majority of us, including myself, with 50 years of experience in judo and a lot of strength training experience, the new generation of attention to detail, how to do certain exercises, is something that many of us struggle with. And I think that it would be very useful exercise if we can do similar session as you did today in the gym, when you can actually demonstrate what kind of details are you paying attention to when you are doing certain common exercises. That would help immensely, because I personally am looking at athletes who I trained for so many years, and I know that I made mistakes in the past, not paying attention to certain things. And this is a newly developed knowledge that I think it would be very useful for the community.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that's really interesting, it's, I was talking about those windows of opportunity. It's like when they are young, you want to work on that technical aspect, because when they're going to be like older and they arrive, they maybe will be training at the national center, who knows, and they arrive and they don't have that good technique base, you have to spend a year to like come back to that base to be sure that they have a strong baseline to be working on. So I agree, it's an important part of the training.
Is anybody has a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. I have a lot of questions. Okay, when we're talking about, strength accumulation, then power development. Are we developing on-mat power at the same time? Like, again, what is the deteriorating effects of, like, you know what, we're working on power stuff at the dojo, and then we're working on strength in the judo club, or I mean in the gym. So like what are the downward effects like on strength if you know what's happening in the club isn't coordinated with what's happening in the gym?
Yeah. One of, like, I would say the main piece about that I'm thinking of, it's like if you want to work on the max strength with your athlete need to be rested, because those work, it's all about that quality. So if you want to work on that max strength and in the gym, in the dojo, they are just pushing really, really hard and they always arrive at the gym super tired, you're not going to be able to have those gains that you're aiming for. So yeah, that's something that you need to think about. And I think that during the year, it's sometimes the qualities that you will be working on will change, right? So that's something to be sure that what you're doing in the gym don't go against what you're doing in the dojo and vice versa.
Got a question. How do you set along the same lines is how do you set up a program when a lot of the kids are at schools and the school teacher may be setting up different programs, and so you don't want them to be antagonistic workouts at the same time because you don't know what the teacher set up?
Well, about that, I think the main thing that you need to put in place is a good collaboration with that person, because it's really hard to be, okay, I'm doing one thing and they are doing something, and we might doing the same, working on the same thing, and like you said, like doing a work that goes against maybe what the kids are doing. So if you have the chance, having like a good talk with that person, just knowing what they are planning to do, gonna help you thinking about what you are going to do in the next week, next month. So yeah, I think that's something that could help you with that.
Okay, my last question. Okay, we're still a lot of us training by Zoom or anything. Tell me your top 5 home training things that you think that, you know, people should be to try to gain some sort of strength, and what repetitions. Again, you can run circuits and stuff like this, but like just trying to maintain between, you know, some people are in the gym, now they're at home, they're not able to get back in the gym, and then we can see that they're going to be in the gym hopefully in the next 3 to 4 weeks. What are you thinking, like 5 exercises that we should like just hit every time we do an online training?
For sure, I think that one of the exercises that you have, but I would be like more general about those one, but anything pulling. So it could be like pulling with a band, pulling with a door row or something. That's one of the movement that they need to do. And especially because when they're going to come back on the mat, they're going to be using a lot of like pulling movement or also pushing. It's easier to do all the push-up kind of movement, but you have to think about like those pulling exercise to just like help them coming back on the mat injured free. Also, anything I will say like lower body, but more about unilateral exercise, because it's easy for one athlete that's already like strong to do like 100 squat, right? But if you just like get them into unilateral movement, it's going to help them work on their balance a bit more. It's going to help them challenge their strength also more. So we'll say that's my second point. But yeah, and anything circuit wise, I will say everything that's like tabata time. So 20 seconds work, 10 seconds rest, or 30 seconds and 10 seconds rest. If you look at the studies out there, they show that that type of time for a circuit, it's look like a judo fight. So that's something that could be interesting. And after that, everything that's mobility, especially for those kids that's going school online, thinking about their position, hip flexor, always seated, round shoulder. So having like exercise that gonna help them stretch and reinforce their back chain would be a good exercise.
Perfect. Thank you.
To finish off, we'll go to the chat, and here's the question from Tracy Angus. Thank you for the excellent presentation. What is the current thinking of the duration in weeks of training for a variety of types of strength? For example, max strength or maximum power for best results. So I guess the length and number of weeks for training phase and different type of strength to optimize gain, I guess.
At least if we see just like in a week for strength, we are talking about 2 or 3 sessions per week to have like strength gains. After that, we're maybe talking between 3 to 6 weeks for a program to have good gains. The idea, it's like if you're not challenging if you're always doing the same training, even if it's during 8 weeks, the body will adapt, right? So you're not going to have any more, we'll say, not adaptation, but like you want to create fatigue, you want the body to recover from it and get stronger. If you get like longer time for a program than that, the body will just adapt, okay? Also, we're talking about max strength, but you have to think that first, when you're gonna start back with your athlete for the strength conditioning training, you just want to make sure that your athletes are resilient. So just everything that's endurance slash hypertrophy, we'll say, so like around 10 rep, you want to get back at that first. And often we will talk about like that phase between 4 to 8 weeks, but you can change the program in between with the same qualities. The only thing, it's also gonna depend of your calendar, competition calendar, I will say. So often what we want to look at the beginning, it's like everything about like muscle endurance, hypertrophy to strength, and after that power to get ready to their tournament. But there again, it's really dependent on the athlete that you have, the level, if they have any injury, and etc.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting. As I mentioned before, we have been recording the session and we will post it on the website at some point next week with the PowerPoint, since there's definitely lots of information to review. So Alix, thank you very much. Very interesting. And thank you all for joining us, and hopefully see you sometime soon. Thank you.